For nearly half a century in the 20th century, the world lived under an intense, silent standoff between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. This was the Cold War, a time when every move, every decision, had the potential to trigger nuclear annihilation, pushing humanity to the brink of extinction. What if this tense game of cat and mouse didn't stay cold? What if it exploded into a full-blown war? A real war, with nuclear bombs raining down, cities leveled, millions of lives hanging by a thread in just hours or days? Could humanity survive? What would the world look like then? Today, we'll journey into that dangerous world, exploring chilling scenarios and untold stories of what might have been if the Cold War had turned hot. If you're fascinated by history, eager to learn from the past, and want fresh perspectives, hit that subscribe button so you won't miss our upcoming videos. Now, get ready to explore this story slowly, deeply, and with the haunting weight it deserves. The Cold War wasn't your typical war with battles and frontline troops. Instead, it was a complex, drawn-out standoff between the world's two biggest superpowers of the 20th century, the capitalist United States and the communist Soviet Union. From roughly 1947 to 1991, the globe was split into two camps, locked in a tense dance that teetered on the edge of nuclear catastrophe. What made the Cold War especially dangerous was its mix of arms race, ideological clashes, and proxy wars. Though the US and USSR never faced off directly in a massive battle, their rivalry played out in hotspots around the world: Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, through allies and surrogate forces. This indirect warfare kept tensions boiling without an all-out confrontation. The nuclear arms race was the darkest shadow of the era. Both sides stockpiled thousands of nuclear warheads, weapons so powerful they could obliterate the planet many times over. The doctrine of mutually assured destruction, MAD, meant that neither side could afford to strike first without risking its own annihilation. This balance of terror kept a fragile peace. Espionage, propaganda, and psychological warfare were the other weapons of choice. Events like the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 and the Berlin blockade in 1948 kept the world watching nervously, wondering if the next move might spark the end of civilization as we know it. In this tense atmosphere, the fear of nuclear war wasn't just theory. It was a daily reality for people worldwide. Throughout the Cold War, the world was peppered with numerous hotspots regions teetering on the brink of erupting into full-scale conflict. These flashpoints served as constant reminders of just how fragile peace was during this tense period. One of the most infamous was the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, when the Soviet Union secretly stationed nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from the US coastline. The world held its breath. President Kennedy responded with a naval blockade, pushing both superpowers to the edge of nuclear war. Thankfully, through intense diplomacy, the crisis was diffused, but it underscored how quickly misunderstandings or provocative actions could spiral into catastrophe. If one of these hotspots had spiraled out of control, the Cold War could have escalated into a full-scale, devastating war. A scenario everyone feared, but hoped would never come to pass. Picture a sudden incident, a reconnaissance plane shot down, an accidental missile launch, or a misinterpreted military exercise. In 1960, the downing of an American U-2 spy plane almost triggered a war. But imagine if tensions had been even higher or communication lines failed. Such a mistake could have unleashed a chain reaction. Both the US and USSR had massive nuclear arsenals. Under the doctrine of mutual assured destruction, MAD, meaning any nuclear strike, would trigger a retaliatory strike, resulting in total annihilation. This strategy, while terrifying, paradoxically kept both sides from launching first. But in a chaotic, high-pressure moment, misjudgments could have led to an unthinkable exchange. The conflict wouldn't have stayed localized. Allies and client states would be drawn in, potentially turning a regional flare-up into a global conflagration. Weapons of mass destruction, chemical, biological, and nuclear, might have been unleashed, causing catastrophic loss of life and irreversible environmental damage. The world would have entered an era of unprecedented chaos. Economic systems shattered, governments toppled, communication and transport infrastructure decimated. Survivors would face a bleak future of radiation, famine, and societal collapse. This stark reality kept leaders painfully aware of the stakes. Every decision, every signal sent, had to be carefully calibrated to avoid triggering this nightmare. The impact of a full-scale nuclear war would be nothing short of apocalyptic. The sheer destructive power of nuclear weapons far exceeds any conventional arms ever used in warfare, capable of annihilating entire cities in an instant and leaving lasting scars on the planet. In the immediate aftermath, millions could perish within minutes due to the blasts and intense heat. Survivors in the surrounding areas would face severe radiation sickness, burns, and injuries, with medical systems quickly overwhelmed and unable to cope. Beyond the initial destruction, nuclear detonations would loft massive amounts of soot and radioactive particles into the upper atmosphere, triggering what scientists call a nuclear winter. This phenomenon would drastically lower global temperatures by blocking sunlight, leading to widespread crop failures and famine that could last for years. The delicate balance of ecosystems would be shattered, threatening countless plant and animal species with extinction. Socially and politically, the consequences would be catastrophic. Governments and infrastructures would collapse, plunging survivors into chaos and lawlessness. Global trade and communication networks would disintegrate, isolating communities and nations. Rebuilding would require generations, with humanity's very survival hanging in the balance. It's this grim potential that haunted leaders and citizens alike during the Cold War era, serving as the ultimate deterrent. The shadow of nuclear annihilation was the reason behind the careful diplomacy, secret negotiations, and the tense but fragile peace that defined the period. The Cold War era, shrouded in secrecy and intense rivalry, has given rise to numerous theories and conspiracies that continue to fascinate and intrigue historians, researchers, and enthusiasts alike. These theories often suggest that much of what transpired was hidden from public view, leaving a veil of mystery over one of the most dangerous periods in modern history. One prominent theory is that the two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, were often closer to open war than publicly acknowledged. Some historians argue that back-channel communications and covert diplomacy prevented what could have been a catastrophic nuclear conflict on multiple occasions. The Cuban Missile Crisis, for example, is widely believed to have involved secret negotiations beyond what was publicly disclosed. Conspiracy theories also suggest that certain governments manipulated or exaggerated threats to maintain control over their populations or justify massive military expenditures. For instance, the paranoia surrounding espionage and enemy agents led to intense surveillance and political witch hunts, fueling fear, but sometimes based on questionable evidence. Other theories delve into secret projects and hidden weapons programs, such as alleged development of advanced technologies, far beyond what was publicly known. There are also claims about clandestine operations involving mind control, psychological warfare, and manipulation of media narratives to shape public opinion. While many of these theories lack conclusive proof, they underscore the deep mistrust and paranoia that defined the Cold War mindset. They remind us that history is often written by those in power, and much remains hidden beneath official accounts. These conspiracies and theories add layers of complexity and intrigue to the Cold War story, inviting us to question what we know and consider the unseen forces that may have shaped global events. Let's pause for a moment and reflect on some intriguing questions that challenge our understanding of the Cold War and its potential to escalate into full-scale conflict. What if the Cold War had been nothing more than a massive game of bluffing? Could both superpowers have known the risks of nuclear war, but were just playing an elaborate game of deterrence, relying on fear to maintain power? Could the constant threat of nuclear war have actually prevented major conflict in some way? Could the sheer knowledge that any aggression would lead to mutual destruction have made both sides more cautious and diplomatic, despite outward appearances of tension? What if a single leader's rash decision, a political misstep, or a simple communication failure had led to global conflict? Given the delicate balance of the era, how many times did the world come dangerously close to disaster, only to be saved by a stroke of luck or a last-minute negotiation? Was the Cold War merely the most intense form of a silent war, with espionage, manipulation, and propaganda as the main tools of engagement? And if so, what does this say about the nature of power and control in modern geopolitics? What if the nuclear arms race didn't end in the 1990s, and the world continued to build even more deadly weapons? How would that have affected global security today? Would we be living in a state of perpetual fear, or would it lead to some sort of uneasy global peace, similar to the Cold Peace maintained during the Cold War? These questions not only add depth to our understanding of the Cold War, but also make us reconsider how close we came to annihilation, and whether the shadows of that time still influence global politics today. The twists of history have shown us that humanity is both fragile and resilient, but it's always worth asking what might have happened if things had taken a different turn. As we reach the end of this journey through the Cold War, we are left with a lingering question. What if the Cold War had turned into a full-blown global conflict? Would humanity have survived? And if so, what would the world have looked like afterward? The Cold War was, in many ways, a period of waiting, a silent standoff marked by an ever-present fear of mutual destruction. Yet it was also a time of remarkable resilience, where diplomacy, restraint, and back-channel negotiations prevented the unthinkable from happening. The world teetered on the edge of disaster for decades, and it's only through the careful calculations and decisions of key leaders that we avoided a nuclear catastrophe. But the Cold War wasn't just about military strategy. It was about ideologies. It was about the clash of two vastly different worldviews, capitalism versus communism, and the belief that the survival of one required the defeat of the other. Yet, as history has shown us, the real battle may have been not just over political systems, but over the future of humanity itself. The true cost of this ideological struggle might not have been measured in weapons or wars, but in the fear, paranoia, and lives disrupted by the specter of nuclear annihilation. As we look to the future, the lessons of the Cold War remain crucial. The danger of unchecked power, the fragility of peace, and the responsibility that comes with the ability to destroy must continue to guide us. In today's world, where new challenges to global security emerge, it's a stark reminder that maintaining peace requires constant vigilance, dialogue, and diplomacy. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into history's most defining moments. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the Cold War, and let's continue to learn from the past to create a better future.